Okay, welcome everybody. Um, we are going to be talking about starting seeds indoors today with our one of our farmers from the Keep Growing Detroit farm, Akello Karamoko. Akello is the manager of our transplant production, of our small plant production for the Garden Resource Program. So he's been doing this for 5 or 6 years now, and he's got a lot of experience that he's bringing to the table. As we go on during the class today, please feel free to add questions or comments in the chat. And also, if you are inclined to answer any questions that you see in the chat, please feel free to do so. We will be able to share the slides from the class today afterwards. And we also have a handout resource that we will share, kind of a one-pager as a reference after the fact. And if you didn't know this, all of our videos we are uploading to our YouTube channel. So we have a nice library of all the classes we've been doing over the past year or so. Lots of good information on there. So be sure and check that out. I'll probably be posting that, the video from today within the next week or so. I'll get it up hopefully by Monday or Tuesday next week. So with that, I'm going to hand over the mic to Akello. If we could give him a warm welcome and take it away, Akello.
All right.
Your camera is off currently.
Cameras.
One of your cameras is off that I see on my main screen.
Okay, that's fine. All right. Welcome everybody. Can you enable the screen sharing for me, please? Welcome everybody to the class today, where we're gonna hop right into it. Growing transplants is really simple. If you all can see up here, to germinate your seeds, all you need is adequate water and heat.
Wait, can you pause for 1 second, Akello? That's not the screen that you're showing.
Oh.
That's not the main screen. That you're. Because I think it's because your mic is on the other one. There you go.
Okay.
Boom, boom.
All right, got it. Now this screen is a little slower. Okay. All right, we're gonna work it out a little bit. Okay. So to germinate your seeds, all you need is adequate water and heat. And I want you all to keep this in the back of your minds as we're going through the PowerPoint presentation and the lesson. And then to keep your plants growing healthy, to keep your seedlings healthy after they germinate. When I say germinate, I mean that the embryo of the seed emerges from the seed coat. Then you get your baby plant. To keep your seedling healthy, you need adequate water, heat, wind, sunlight, and nutrients, okay? And now let's screen share. Now, this is all in a, can you see the screen, Keto?
Yep.
All right, Great. So this is all the goal to get to, this point where you have healthy looking transplants, okay? So this is our goal. These are transplants that were given out. These are pictures from 2019, I believe. So we want healthy looking transplants, which have their cotyledon leaves, which are on the bottom. They're heart-shaped leaves for these brassicas. These are collared. And you can see they have about 2 to 3 true leaves per plant, okay? This is what we're going for. This is what we're aiming for, and also pay attention to some of those yellowing cotyledon leaves. That's an important sign. Whoa. Is the video feed good, Keto?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, great. we're looking for healthy looking plants here. I get that. This is what we're going for. And let's screen share. And so how do we get there to healthy looking plants, and particularly starting plants indoors? So why start seeds indoors? Well, today is the first day of spring, and with spring, you know, comes growing plants. It's also an important survival skill, and it's an excellent activity to do with the family. But most importantly, starting your plants indoors helps you extend your growing season. So Michigan's growing season is between May 1st and October 31st. May 1st, between May 30th is when we should be experiencing our last frost. And so once we have our last frost, then we know that we can go out and plant our plants safely, specifically if they're fragile or more affected by the cold temperature. And then our first frost would be during October 1st and October 31st. And so that would, you know, you don't want to plant anything around October 31st unless it's something you're overwintering like garlic, but you wouldn't want to plant your tomato plant October 1st. You'd be looking to plant your tomato plants, for example, sometime during May or early June.
Akela, can you distinguish that some of those that we're distributing some plants in April? So what's the difference? Why can we plant those before that May date, or?
So with our garden resource program, we do 3 distributions throughout the year. And in those distributions, we have collards, kale, tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, and cucumbers, watermelons. Now we don't give those out all at the same time because they have specific temperatures and weathers and climates that need to be reached before they can properly grow. And so we, with our transplant distribution and our distribution in general, we handle that timing part for you all. And so you'll be receiving your plants during their ideal growing period. And so, for example, your cold crops, which are your brassicas, your collards, your kales, and brassicas is the family name of some of these plants I'm mentioning. Your collards, your kale, your Brussels sprouts will be received as transplants in April, because they can handle the colder weather, and it's an ideal time to plant those plants. And your tomato plants, your peppers, your eggplants would be received in mid-May when we should be experiencing our last frost. So then you all can harden off your plants, get them used to the temperature by putting them outside a little bit during the day, bringing them in before it gets colder at night. Do that for a week, then you can plant your hot crop plants outside. And so the reason why it's more important for the hot crop plants not to be planted before the first frost, because they can't handle those lower temperatures, anything below 40 degrees, and your hot crop plants might freeze. And this is because they just what's the word? Biologically, this is how they the climate, the temperatures that they normally grew up. So like tomato plants, they're from South America, and generally South America is warmer. And if we want to plant tomatoes here in Michigan, we kind of have to give them that temperature that they're used to. All right. And so this is why we give out our cold crops during April, hot crops during May, and then we do another round of cold crops during July. Right. And so when you all are starting your own seeds, when you all are starting your own seeds, you want to have in mind the days that you plan on putting your plants outside inside of the garden, okay? And then you also want to have in mind what's the weather going to be like that week. So although you might have your plan on paper of like you want to plant your brassicas, your tomato, your collards and kales April 15th, you still want to check the weather and make sure that it's not too cold, below freezing at night, and that it's not too wet outside. So you still want those ideal growing conditions to be present outside along with your ideal planting dates. And if it's not ideal, if the conditions outside are not ideal, then just wait a week or wait a couple of days, wait for the soil to dry out a little bit, then plant your plants. They still should be okay, even if they're spending an extra week inside of their transplant or inside of their tray. All right, so let's talk about planting dates that we use for the Garden Research Program transplants. And so this is a good time to write the notes, and I think I can also type this into, well, Keto, if you could help me type this into the chat box for people.
Yeah.
So for our GRP distribution, we really start transplanting plants beginning like the first week of February. So that's week 5. That's when we start our onions and leeks. And week 8 and 9.
Wait, can you explain what you mean by week 5 and week 8
Yeah.
and week 9?
Yep. So week 5 is basically going to be February 1st. Okay.
Like, but can you explain the logic of that?
The logic of that. So let's say it's January 1st. That's going to be week 1, and then January 7th would be week 2, so on and so forth. January 14th would be week 3. And this is just the way that farmers put in perspective and kind of break up the year so that we can keep track with our planting and our other duties throughout the year. And so I'm giving the week 5s and also what that translates to date-wise. So week 5 would be February 1st. That's when we start our onions and leeks. Week 8 and 9, which is February 1st and February 21st and February 28th. That's when I'm starting my eggplants, peppers, celeries, and other herbs. And although those dates have passed, it's not too late to start your plants, okay? Those are just ideal dates that we do for the Garden Resource Program. So I know that.
Can you tell me why did you decide on those dates?
Yeah. So for our Garden Research Program, so for the peppers and eggplants, for example, those are going to go out mid-May. And so eggplants and peppers need about a month and a half to grow to reach their ideal stage when they have their about 2 to 3 true leaves. They're more developed. And so that's when they're really sturdy after a month and a half of growing inside of their tray. And so when I'm planning our distribution, we know that we have our ideal plant date. I'm going to count backwards about 6 to 8 weeks, depends on what you want to do. And that's how I landed on my date for February 21st and February 28th. Okay.
Mhm.
When you look up and when you're ordering your seeds, they typically provide the germination or the transplant timeline for them. So like for tomatoes, when you look it up on a website like Johnny's Seeds, or for example, you go down, you scroll down to the growing information, and they'll tell you start your transplants 8 weeks or X weeks before your plant date.
Uh-huh. And sometimes they relate it to the last frost or the first frost. Is that right?
Yeah, they
Or
do.
last frost, I mean.
They do, exactly. So for us, that would be May, basically. So you're gonna count backwards from May. Thank you, Keto. All right, so let's continue. In week 10 and 11, that's going to be March, and this is just for this year. That's March 7th and March 14th. That's when I'm starting my brassicas, my collards, kales, cabbage, broccoli. And this is what we're doing for the Garden Research Program this year, if you all want to follow along. And for your information as well, this week right here, this week is week 11. Week 12 starts Sunday. And so week 12 is super important. Oh, we got a question or?
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah. Okay.
The question was, is that's when you're starting those seeds? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. This is what we're doing actually for Garden Research Program 2021. And I'll mention again, although the start date for eggplants and peppers have passed, you can still start those seeds and get plants that are still ahead of schedule, or plants that will help you extend your season, pardon me. So week 12 and week 13, which is going to be March 21st, tomorrow, and week 13 is March 28th. That's when I'm starting our tomato transplants and our lettuce transplants and our Brussels sprouts. Super important week 12. Everybody loves their tomatoes. And it's a really good week to start your transplants. So week 14, which is April 4th, I'm starting basil. Week 15, tomatillos, which is marked April 11th. And then lastly, week 17, and I didn't write down that date ahead of time. That's going to be week 11. Week 17 is April 26th, I believe, or 29th, sorry. I'm starting cucurbit, which are our watermelons and such. So, sorry about the longness of that, but dates are really important for starting your seeds and starting your plants. You don't want to miss your dates when you are planting your plants and starting your transplants. You can really see the difference of a plant that was planted 2 weeks late versus a week late versus a plant planted on time. It can really affect your harvest.
Kello, can you I think some people are really itching to grow like in January, and sometimes people start seeds indoors at that time. Can you talk about how the pros and cons of that, or just what the what you're thinking about is about that, like how are those plants going to do?
So if you're planning on starting your plants in January, just understand your capacity and how much nutrients and nurturing that plant is going to need. So let's say, for example, And if you're starting your plants in January, I imagine that you have a greenhouse, something to put that plant in.
Well, I mean, in most scenarios, likely not. I mean, so what kind of light and
Yeah.
nutrients, like what are, what are people going to end up with?
Yeah. So what you're gonna need, so let's say you're gonna need your germ flat, a heat mat and such. And I have, we can do a demonstration of this a little bit later. But those key things that you're gonna need your grow lights and also your germ flat. And then you're gonna need larger pots for your plants because they're gonna be growing while they're there in January. So come like late February, your tomato plant it's gonna outgrow, your starter flat. And so you want to be ready to pot that up so that it has more nutrients to grow in. It's not impossible to, or it's not unheard of to start your tomato plants or your pepper plants in January. But what you just want to understand is that you're going to have to, keep them inside until that weather breaks and have the ability to nurture them all the way until May if you don't have a greenhouse, and if you don't have a greenhouse, then you gotta, keep them healthy all the way until then. And that really involves having adequate air, moisture. Frankly, you're gonna have to nurture that plant.
Yeah. So, I guess the question is, just can it boil it down? Like, is that going to really work out in their favor to start them that early?
Well, yes, you can use fluorescent lights. Just answering that question. As long as you see something that says grow lights, it's going to be perfectly fine for you to grow your seedlings in. It really depends on if you're starting your plants in January and you're a backyard garden. It doesn't really. It's a lot of extra steps that you're taking unless you're doing it for the passion. It's something that's more understandable if you're a market gardener and you're trying to get to the markets as soon as possible, be the first one at the table with your tomatoes, then push it. If you don't have to push those dates, I'd say take it easy and, start your tomato plants in March so that you only have to hold them in there, inside for like a month or so. So it really all depends on what your goals are with that plant and then also your capacity to keep that plant healthy. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's I personally haven't tried growing our tomatoes in January. The earliest that we do our tomatoes would be February, mid-February, but that's for like the farm planting. And those are plants that are going to go into the greenhouse. For the plants that are going out in the field, we're starting those, week 12, which is tomorrow. And those are plants that are going to gardeners across the city of Detroit. And so that's kind of like the scope, if you will, for those transplants.
I'll answer Lakita's question.
Okay. Yeah. So let's get into it. So we understand that we have ideal dates for our transplants. Now we need to figure out how many do we need to grow to guarantee success. So not every single transplant that you will seed will germinate. On seed packets, they list their germination rates. Sometimes they say 90% or 70%. It really depends on the seed and the company, but they let you up front that 90% of those seeds will grow. So for example, if you have 100 seeds and only 90% of those germinate, then that you're going to have 90 seeds that will ultimately grow. So to account for plants that don't germinate, when you're ordering your seeds or germinating your seeds, you always want to grow a little bit more. And so we recommend that you grow at least or germinate at least 30% more than what you need. Now, if you have experienced issues with germinating plants in the past, so like I used to have a hard time germinating our eggplants when I first started. I increased that germination rate to now I order twice as many eggplant seeds that I need, and I also order twice as many pepper seeds that I need, because I know that those ones are a bit more finicky when they germinate, or to get them to germinate, they're a bit more involved. So there are nuances to germination rates. So like brassicas, those typically germinate all the time, easily. But I would still order at least 30% more of those seeds, or start those seeds more than I would need. So if you're planning on planting 100 brassica plants outside in your garden, germinate 130 seeds. All right. So we mentioned earlier that for a seed to grow properly, for a seed to germinate, it just needs water and heat. Now there are ideal temperatures for plants, and that just means that they're gonna germinate at a more consistent rate. Yes, I see. I'm gonna answer this question really quick that was in the chat. So seeds from last year should be able to germinate well if they were stored properly. To properly store a seed, it needs to be kept in a cool, dark place and dry place for it to hold its integrity, if you will. So as long as you have a cool, dark place that's dry and like you kept your seeds there, then they should germinate well. But you should still, before you place your bets on that seeds, perform a germ test on them, or grow them out and see what you get. If your seeds are like older than 3 years, I would recommend that you purchase some new seeds. And if they weren't properly stored, I recommend that you also purchase new seeds. Now, temperatures that we use to get our plants to germinate well, it varies from plant to plant. But for brassicas, and Keto, if you could type this in, brassicas, we germinate them at 70 degrees. So your collards, your kales, and such, you want to make sure that they have a consistent temperature of 70 when they're in their seed forms. For peppers, eggplants, and tomatoes, we're trying to keep those at 80 degrees. And when you keep them at these temperatures, that means that they're going to germinate consistently. They're going to have a higher germination rate when you do so. And then some things like to germinate at a lower temperature, like spinach, for example, likes to germinate at 60 degrees.
Okay, to review.
Yes.
Generally, cold crops 70 degrees, generally hot crops 80 degrees.
Mm-hmm. And as
there's a question about herbs.
Yeah, as a baseline, as long as you keep your seeds like 70 degrees, you should be okay. Okay. So like for a random seed that you don't have experience with, just keep it at 70 and it should do well. Now,
before we go on from
yes.
heating, could you just you're referencing you've referenced a lot of materials like and that and used a little bit of terminology that it would be maybe helpful to have some visuals. So like if you could talk about the heat mat or heating sources. And you were been talking about germ flats and that kind of thing. And if you could show those things, I think that would be helpful.
Gotcha. Yes. Let me whoa. Oh, is the PowerPoint still up?
No.
Oh, I think it dropped. But just a moment, let me pull that back up. Right. Just a moment. All right, joining back in with my computer. Oh. Okay. Now, seems like the internet dropped on my computer, but let me know if you all can see this well, and I'll try to get my computer back online.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. That'll be a little cricket. But to kind of give you all examples. So this right here is just a simple heat mat. And
can you bring it a little closer to the camera?
Yes. This is a simple heat mat. Last year we did a giveaway of these, but you can find these at your local farm supply store. And these typically stay around 70 to 80 degrees, depending. And so this is something that you can use at home easily. What we do at the farm, we just have, it's really simple. It's basically 2 shelves with PVC pipe in between to kind of let plants kind of level up. And then we wrap that around with plastic, and we put a heater underneath. And so the heat kind of captures in. It's really bare bones, but it stays 70 degrees, which is the important part. So always remember that, you know, whatever your setup is, as long as your plants are getting adequate water and the temperature that they need, they will germinate. And then once they germinate, then you have to do those steps of making sure they have sunlight, nutrients, and wind to keep them growing healthily.
And wind being the fan, of course, right?
Wind, yes, wind being the fan. Since we're talking about the fan, you don't need the fan when your plants are in the germinating phase. So let me back up and go through the steps, okay? Now, so weird. Unfortunately, my internet is out. But before I start, so let's say we got our seeds here in our seed pack. What I like to do with my seeds is to soak them. And so for my tomato seeds, I soak these in water that are about room temperature for about 2 to 4 hours. And this is going to help me increase the germination rate of those tomato plants. Now, seeds don't normally germinate because they're either not getting enough water or getting too less water. And for me, I learned that, our plants are, for us, the issue that we were having was that they weren't getting enough water. And so to kind of speed up that germination rate and also increase that germination percent, I soak them for a certain period. So for tomatoes and other brassicas, I'm doing about 2 to 4 hours. If you have something big like a bean seed or a shell pea or a pea, you can soak those overnight, and that will help them germinate faster. So if you ever had that moment where you like planted your bean seed and it took forever for those to sprout when you planted them outside, germinating your seeds, not germinating, soaking your seeds before you plant them is going to help with that. Okay, yeah. All right, so yeah, just to kind of start off, you can get very creative with the trays that you use for germinating your plants. This right here is just some takeout trays that we got. Also have lids with them, which is important. One thing that you should do, you want to cut some holes in here for some air circulation. And a big tip, instead of poking holes in the bottom, I suggest that you poke holes on the sides at a certain height. Now, this is going to help you in case you don't water your plants on time, or if you forget to water your plants. So like normally all the water just falls out of here because it's the bottom, but all the water is going to not flow out because you just have it on the side, okay? Now, here we have sunshine mix, which is what we use here at the farm, which is basically perlite and peat moss. Perlite perlite is this white material here. It's volcanic ash, and it helps keep the soil aerated and nice and fluffy, so it keeps air coming to the roots of the plant. And then perlite is a very light material which holds water very well. And you typically see these used in potting mixes or that. I see the question about the ratio. With the sunshine mix, it's already pre-mixed. If you're gonna make your own mix, do about, in your one page, you had it as 65% peat moss and then 25% compost and 15% or 10% so. Yeah, if you could write that in for them. They had a question about the ratio. Thank you. So you can use this as your media mix. If you're making your own, you want to make sure that it's light. If you're using heavy materials, it's going to make it harder for your plants to germinate through them. So at like the stage of their seedling stage, I would try to avoid using mixes that are heavy in compost, because if you put that on top of your seed plant, or if you put down a layer of soil that's too thick, then it's going to be too hard for your plant to push through that. And also, it would just be too much for the roots to handle in terms of water being held too much or air not coming through. Once plants are a bit more developed, it's easier for them to handle mixes or nutrients, mixes or media mixes that have a lot of compost in it. So once you have that here and your seeds are germinated, level out your soil, sprinkle through your seeds, make sure that they're not right on top of each other. You want to give them at least about an inch of space between them. And when you're topping your soil, or when you're putting soil on top of your plants, you want to make sure that you put just a thin layer on top of them. You don't want to give them anything that's more than the width of that seed. So you don't want to bury your plants, basically. And there are some alternatives you can use to topping your plants. Because in my experience, we've had an issue where, when we were topping and putting soil on top of our plants, the plants weren't pushing through the soil because the layer was too thick, and also the soil was too heavy for the plants to emerge through, or for the seedling to break through the soil. So you can use other things like vermiculite, which is also another volcanic material, which is super light and easy for plants to break through. And also, it's very good at holding moisture as well. So that's
that's kind of it's a nice option for a top dressing, because it.
Yeah. Yes. I use it specifically with our peppers and eggplants, and also our celery. Now, when you have your plants like here planted in their pots, water them in. Well, let's backtrack a little bit. If you are mixing your own media, I recommend that you water it just a little bit, get it moist, and this is going to help it not dry out as fast. So once you have it like so, you top dressed it with a bit of soil, water it again, just a little bit. Don't make it too wet. To test the wetness, just put your finger inside of the pot and see how much soil is left on your hand. Or when you're mixing it inside of its container, grab a few of it, squeeze it, see how much water falls out. If it's really soaked and if it's really wet, you'll see a whole bunch of water drip through. What you want to see is that it's just moist to the touch, and that it's really hard for water to come out of your hand when you squeeze it. It's really going to be a lot of a muscle memory and just experience with learning how to properly water and keep your plants watered. So once you got your seeds in here inside of your container, this right here is another huge tip. You want to lock in that moisture by putting a top over it. So this is kind of like a clamshell now. This is going to help keep those plants moist, and it's also going to help you germinate those plants quicker. And you still want to make sure that there are a couple of holes in here for moisture to escape through. And then you want to put that on top of your heat mat and have it plugged in. But even at this stage, it's okay if you don't have like your lights set up or such, but that's still fine. If you do have germ lights or using germ lights, that's okay. You just want to make sure that this is about a foot away from your plants, okay? You don't want to have it too far away. It's not as strong as sunlight, and you don't want to have it too close to your plants. So the sweet spot, if you will, is a foot away from your plant.
Kello, well, I don't know. I guess I have a different opinion. Can I just give my 2 cents? That I've usually done them real close, like within an inch of the plant, because of the quality of the light.
Well,
do you see an issue with that?
It does really depend on the light.
Okay. Well, in this case, we're talking about LED lights. So, the options of lights that are out there, there's a lot more LED lights out on the market now. And this particular light you can get from Home Depot for about $40. And it's specifically intended for growing. So do they tell you on the box, do they give a recommendation on spacing?
They do not.
Okay. Well, we'll just say between, that you should experiment, but I think there are practical, just, it is a trial and error thing. I'm going to pose a few questions here from the chat. Does KGD have a recommended place to buy seeds?
A recommended place. We don't have a recommended place.
I mean, the common places that people get seeds from, you know, are Johnny Seeds, Fedco, FEDCO. I'll put some in the chat.
Yeah. Seeds companies that we normally source from for the garden research program include Johnny's, Selected Seeds, Fedco, High Mowing, Nurture and Nature Seeds. Trying to remember our other ones. Kitazawa Seeds, and we also use Woolite Seeds company. One thing that you might experience when you're ordering your seeds this year is a whole bunch of back orders and such. That's just because of shipping errors and also sourcing errors. Just one of the another frustrations of the year. But yes, fluorescent lights are also okay to use, but when you are going out to buy your lights, just make sure that they're at least labeled grow lights or advertised as that way to keep it simple. So once your plants start to emerge, yes, all of those companies are non-GMO seed providers. So once your seedlings start to emerge, then you're gonna need sunlight and air. So
or grow light in air.
Or grow light. Well, yes. I do want to share some pictures of understanding how light affects your plants. So I'll do that in a second.
Do you need a second to figure out how to get your computer back working?
It's working now. I just need to shift over to pull it up.
Great.
All right, just a moment. All right, you should see my request now, Keto.
Yep.
Great, thank you. So let me mute myself.
Hold on,
All right, can you enable screen share for me?
Yeah, hold on.
Thank you. All right, so can you all see the screen right now?
We just see your, yes, we do.
All right, great. So these are some brassicas that,
well, we don't, we are just seeing like all of your pictures. Could you, are you, maybe you.
One sec. Oh, I see.
You have to choose which screen to share.
Yeah, it's showing me the. Here we go. Interesting. It's not.
Can you go down to the screen share option?
Yeah. Here we go. Okay, let me restart because it's
there you go.
Some issues.
We're up now.
Okay, great. All right. Okay, great. So these right here are some brassica flats that were a bit light deprived. And this is just so that you understand how light affects plants. So these went about 2 days without getting any sunlight. Now, grow lights are a great addition to your at-home, growing setup. But I personally feel that it's not totally necessary. It all really depends on your timing. Now, these plants went about a day or so without light, and so I pulled them out of our germ chamber, which is dark. Now, if this screen is gonna let me go to them. There we go. So these are the plants that I pulled out that were just yellow, and I pulled them out of the germ chamber, and after 2 days, they're starting to green, okay? So, and this is just to show you that although your plants are yellowing because they're not getting enough light, that doesn't mean that they're gonna, instantly perish. You can still, you have time to save them, you have time to get them light. So like, for example, if this is your house setup, your germ chamber is dark and whatnot, and they're kind of yellow, just take them out of the germ chamber and just put them in front of a window. If you don't have germ lights or such, they will do just fine. They will come back to life. It's not not going to be the end for those plants. And I also want to show you all, and my screen is a bit slow. I haven't gotten to that yet, but here's one thing I want to highlight right now. Should be moving. So these are some collar plants that are about 2 weeks old. In some cases, when you're germinating a lot of plants, we germinate a ton of seeds and we have some extra seeds left over. Look at how long those stems are, okay? This typically happens when plants are in competition with each other and also inside of a tray for too long. They start to stretch and they start to grow kind of deformed in a way. Like this isn't how a normal collard plant should look. The stem is just really long and such. Now, and this is just so you know, like, oh, this is for your troubleshooting. If you see your plants are beginning to stretch, if you're seeing them begin to yellow, this could be a sign that one, they need to be potted up, they need more space, or that they need more sunlight. And of course, if you see your plants drying out, if you see your soil looking dry, then that means that you need to water your plants some more. And if you see that your plants are a bit overwatered, that means that you need to lessen how much water you water your plants. So, and this is just to show how, things can happen throughout the growing season, right? But it doesn't mean that it's the end for your plants. You just need to know what steps you need to take. So if you see that your plants are yellowing, I'll talk about this picture in a moment. If you see that your plants are yellowing, then that means that you need to get them sunlight. If you see that they're stretching, that could be a sign of they need sunlight, and they also might need more space for themselves. Now, this picture here, this is a picture of leeks that we started in the first week of February. Now, this particular tray was suffering from dampening off. So dampening off is a soil-borne fungus that attacks plants at their roots. Reasons why dampening off happens is because it's in the soil, but although it's in the soil doesn't necessarily means that it has its the correct growing, its ideal habitat. But if you overwater your trays, then you also have adequate heat, then your dampening off can start to show and affect your plants. So what I did to address this dampening off, and you can kind of see in the middle, that's where it started off, and you can start to see it, the effects of dampening off start to lessen as you get to the edges of the tray. So what I did here was incorporate more wind into my setup. So this is why it's important to have a fan and air circulation within your setup, because wind is what really prevents diseases from growing. When they're dry, because the wind is blowing on them, that really kills them or deters them. And also things that you can do is change your watering habits. So this tray was probably getting watered too much, and thus dampening off had, all it needed to grow. And so what I did was to start to water that less and less to let that fungus dry out, and for it to ultimately start to lessen its effect on the tray. So when you're setting up your germ chamber and your plants have started to grow and such, keep your fan in like the background. You don't want your fan to be right on top of your plants. You want it just to be, far away enough that there's just a continuous, slow draft that's blowing on your plants. This is, it is going to speed up how quickly that tray dries out, but it's also going to deter and put pressure on things like mold and such. Now, or fungus. Now, when you're starting off, other deterrents that you can do, besides, properly managing, your water, your heat, you want to make sure that you're starting off with a disease-free media. Now, sunshine mix that comes, disease-free, but when you're working with things like compost, although it does have like nutrients and such, it can still be a presence for, fungi and such, which is all natural. I don't think you shouldn't use compost just because there's that, a factor that it might have, other things inside of it. It's totally normal. Really, the presence of the disease isn't the issue. It's the immune system, it's the environment. Are you encouraging those things to grow? Okay. Any questions about that?
No.
And dampening off is like the main thing that you see when you're germinating your plants. Is the main issue. It's the main disease that the main fungus that normally shows up when you're germinating your plants. It's just something that you need to know. You want to have your fan on 24/7, answering some of the questions right now. You can just you can spread your seeds by hand. That's how I do it.
I've answered a few of those.
Oh, you did already?
Yeah. Question,
Okay.
Akelo. I'm wondering if it would be
Yes.
helpful to just to take a second and just summarize the whole process.
Yeah.
Because we're starting to dig in on the dirty details of each of these things. And I just think it might be helpful for people to hear, like, you germinate the seeds, you set up your mat, you germinate the seeds, and then you do this, and then you do this,
Mm-hmm.
then you do this, and then you do this. And then we can kind of come back and review each of those steps. It seems to me that would be helpful,
Yeah. All right. Am I back to the?
Yep.
All right. Okay. So let's say you got your setup first. When I'm starting my process, I'm first looking at, what are my seed dates going to be? So and ideal times when I want to plant my plants. And so that's I gave you all those start dates for those plants. And then of course you order your seeds. And I'm just starting from like my process. Tips for when you all are ordering your seeds, just make sure that you give yourselves about 3 weeks before you need those seeds, because things are just really coming in slow. So you want to put your orders in for seeds if you're ordering them, or and if possible, I recommend that you find some place in person where you can buy your seeds from, because things are very bad long. So you got your seeds in hand and such. With your setup, make sure that you have your heat. Using a heat mat, you can also use a radiator and such. I also recommend that you have a thermometer to keep track of things. And there you go. To water your plants, you can use a spray bottle, or you can use this right here is called a faucet hose. And then what we use here at the farm, we use a 1,000 dram nozzle. This is for once your plants are larger and if you have a lot of plants that you're working with, but a spray bottle will get you where you need to go. And then I forget what this is called, but it's a bottle that has a hole in it so you can spray water by just squeezing.
Could you just, I mean, what is the effect of the water that you're trying to get at? I mean, with those different options.
Yeah. So what you want to be careful once your plants are planted, you don't want to displace them. So you just want to be able to put water on them without displacing them or overwatering them. You don't want to move the seeds while you're trying to get them wet. You just want to get your seeds wet without displacing them. And you also don't want to overwater. So a spray bottle would be fine just for the house setting. If you do have the ability to hook up a water hose or such inside of your basement or wherever, I recommend that you invest in a faucet nozzle. It's really going to help put down water just fine. Your water, answering a question, doesn't necessarily have to be purified. Tap water is fine. Tap water is what we use for the transplants at the farm. But if you do want to do purified water, go for it. So we went over putting your soil inside of the tray, your mix. I'll repeat again what we do for KGD. Our soil mix is 5 cubic feet of sunshine mix, mixed with 20 gallons of compost, with, I forgot to mention this, 1 cup of 3 amendments, which are blood meal, rock phosphate, and green potash. Now, these are amendments that are just going to help us hold our plants in there for about a month until they go out to GRP members. The blood meal adds nitrogen, the rock phosphate adds phosphate, and the potash adds potassium. Really simple amendments. You can use other things like worm castings. You can use compost or kelp, fish emulsion, all types of nutrients out there that you can use. All right. So with your setup, you want to make sure that you have your heat, your lights, whether you're using grow lights or sunlight. And with grow lights, you want to make sure that with your plants in general, once they germinate, you want to make sure that they're getting at least 12 to 16 hours of light each day. And it's important that they have a dark cycle. So You don't want to keep your lights on all the time, and you also don't want to keep them in the dark all the time. And with your fan, you just want to have it set up so that it's not directly on top of your plants. You want to have it somewhere in the background so that you can get just a light breeze on your plants. Now, that's the setup. Now, maintenance is basically what you're going to be doing on a daily basis. To properly check your plants, I recommend that you're checking them at least twice a day. So you're coming in, hopefully, well, before you leave work in the morning or after you return from work. You check on your plants, make sure that they have adequate water. And then you also want to make sure that if they've germinated or if they started to germinate, that you put them in the light. The way that I like to describe it, water and temperature helps your plants, germinate. It helps them move. Sunlight to me helps kind of regulate that growth, helping your plant grow correctly. Now that's pretty much the process, just making sure that they have adequate light, temperature. Things that you're also going to check for are stretching. Well, is stretching. You're going to check for diseases. So if you do have, dampening off starting to happen or plants are starting to flop over, you also want to check for watering, if your soil's dry or if it's too wet. And that's pretty much, what I'm checking for on a daily when I'm checking the plants at the greenhouse. Another important note is you want to make sure that you have, your trays and things labeled, because if, let's say if you got two different types of peppers right next to each other, they can easily get lost or mixed up in the fray. All right. Anything else from that, Keto?
Nope. So, I mean, and then and do you feel like you've addressed pricking out or planting out, or however you want to explain it?
So, potting up. So let's say you have your, and forgive me for not bringing an actual plant to show you all, but yeah, let me draw this on the, or can you all see the front? Great.
Yep.
I'll bring that a little closer. So, when to move your plants out of their starter trays. Because those starter trays aren't the final home for those plants. Typically, when you're germinating plants, you have a bunch of them in the same place together. And so ultimately, you're going to need to pot them up to get them more space and get them better airflow. So once your plants have germinated, so when I put my plants inside of their pots, I'm not moving them for at least a week. Now, although your plants, they seed, they germinate, it's really up to you when you move them, as long as they're still healthy. So a sign of an unhealthy plant in its tray is one that's growing up too long or it's stretching. And also plants that are starting to mold because there's too many plants around. So if your plants are starting to demonstrate those two things, I'd say it's time to pot them up. But
Kello, could you give the best case scenario? Like, I know it's flexible, but like, what is the rules that you use? Like, that you need to move them onto bigger pots when?
Yes. So generally, I am moving my plants at least a week after they've germinated. So, and also they have these characteristics. So your plants, they start off with their cotyledon leaves, which are their baby leaves. You want to move them after they start to show their true leaf. And so like for brassicas, for example, their cotyledon leaves look like this. And can you all see that? I can.
Yep, that's great. It's fine.
So brassicas, their cotyledon leaves look like heart-shaped leaves. And this is what they look like after about 5 days of germinating from seed. Now, if I were to try to move them at this stage, some cases, the plant is just too fragile to work with. And so this is why you have to wait to work with that plant. If I were to try to grab this, it would just be so small to work with. So you have to give your plants time to mature more before you start to work with them. Now, so let's say, all right, germinated that seed, it's been a week. That plant should be strong enough to handle, the motions that you're about to put in. So should have a little true leaf starting to peek through the middle. When I'm potting up my plant, you don't want to grab that plant by the stem. You don't want to grab that plant by the root, because if the stem or root breaks, and typically a baby plant at this stage just has a single radical, okay? So if this breaks off or if the stem breaks off, then that's it for your plant. So when you're coming to pot up your plant, you want to make sure that you're, scoop it out of the soil first. But when you're handling it, you want to only handle it by its cotyledon leaf, because typically they have 2 cotyledon leaves. Now, if one cotyledon leaf breaks, it still has another to help it photosynthesize. And then you want to take that into, whatever larger container that you're putting it in. When you repot your plant, typically it's like green at this side, and then the root is white. When you replant that, you want to plant it at that same height where the stem turns green to white. That's where you want to plant your plant, okay? Make sure that your root is completely covered and that your root is not exposed to the sunlight. If your root is exposed to the sunlight, your plant is going to dry out. Now, whatever container you're using, now if you're planting like multiple plants in a container, I just recommend that you give them some space in between the next plant and such. We typically use 4 packs, which are about this big, and we put a seedling in each one. That's totally fine for them. You just want to make sure that you don't overplant too closely and make your plant have to compete with others.
Michaela, why don't you just plant the seeds in each one of those cells?
Well, you can. It really all depends on how many are you doing. So we're doing 200,000 transplants. We have to do it in a way where we can maximize things. But if you're in a position where you just have maybe 10 plants that you're working with, you can simplify that by planting them directly where they're going to be planted and such.
Is it in that situation? Would you plant? Was it just 1 seed per cell, or should you do more?
In that scenario, typically planting 2 to 3, depending on that type of seed. So if it's something that has a low germination rate, I would do 3 seeds. If it has a higher germination rate, I would do 2 seeds. But
okay,
I like to germinate things in one tray where I have them all there, so that I have all my plants that I'm going to need, more than what I need, And then I like to take take the ones and then put them in the trays that I know are guaranteed. So typically what we do at the farm, we have a big tray where we seed them in, and there's about maybe 20 seeds per cell in this tray, for example. And so we germinate a lot of them inside of here. And it's okay for them to germinate right next to each other because we are ultimately gonna put them inside of a different tray where they're separated. Typically the steps are, they start off in one tray and either they go into a bigger tray that they can last longer in because that tray has more nutrients for that plant, or either you're taking it from, one tray to straight outside. It really all depends on the steps. Because we are, giving these away to people, we take them from one place, from one tray to the next tray to people's homes. So it really all depends on your system. All right, let's see where we are. Just going back to the PowerPoint. All right. So I'm just gonna go through the PowerPoint, make sure I haven't missed anything. Seed depth and seed spacing. So when you are putting your seed inside of the soil, you want to make sure that you're not covering it too much. So let's see, for example, if your seed is, this big, you want to cover with soil that's, just the same size as that. You don't want to put on it twice as much soil. That's going to be too hard for that plant to emerge from, okay? So if you have like a tiny brassica seed, you're just going to put like a thin layer of soil that's going to help it keep moist, okay? A lot of seeds fail because they just can't push out of that soil layer that's on top of them. And also you can help address that by using something lighter than soil, like perlite, peat moss, and what have you. Let's see.
You want to show that? Is that the video of Lola?
I think that's just a picture.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But I think on our Facebook page, she has posted a reel, or Instagram if people want to see the potting up process. So a lot of this we talked about. So with our fertilizers, those things that you're adding to, just give your plants a bit more of a boost. If you see that they're yellowing, even though they have sunlight or such. If you see that your plants are yellowing, even though they have sunlight, it could be a sign of overwatering or a sign that they're not getting enough nitrogen. So, check your watering. But if they're not getting enough nitrogen, you can add things like worm castings. You just want to take just a little bit, sprinkle that within the tray. Or if you want to use blood meal, same process, just a little bit, sprinkle that through your plants and then water it in. There is technologies that help you put a timer on your light. So you can plug your light into the timer and then you can set it for 12 hours or 16 hours and it shuts off and turns on during the appropriate times. Look into that. This is just a picture of the mix that we use.
There was a question about that, Akello. I mean, is there like
Mhm.
My general state, there was like, they wanted to know specifically where can you get sunshine mix? And so I told them about BFG.
Mhm.
I just said generally like most, potting mixes are probably going to be fine.
Home Depot, Home Depot, Lowe's.
Okay.
That's where you'll find this. And this is
There-
one that we've been using forever. Yep, Keto.
When you get a second, after you're done with this slide, if you could click back for a second, somebody wanted to take a look at the last one.
Oh, sorry, everybody. Yes. Let me see if I can. Oh, no. All right, let me back out. Okay. And we're just kind of in review mode, making sure I'm not missing any important details. And if you all have we will be sharing out this PowerPoint, but you can also screenshot it if I'm going too fast. All right, moving on. Okay. All right, so these are the fertilizers that we use, just some of the characteristics and what they add. Nitrogen is super important for chlorophyll. And when you're creating your mix, it doesn't necessarily have to be, these amendments. There are other things out there that you can use. Azlemite, for example, adds a ton of micronutrients as well, is something that we used last year. Azlemite, to repeat, one thing we use new. So here's your example. So, there are germ lights and also the timer. You can have them right on top of your plant, or maybe really depends on the power of the light. You can have it further away, a foot at most. And then here's just our written down soil mix. All right. We didn't really talk about heat damage and frost damage. So, damage on plants shows differently. But for frost damage in particular, your plant will kind of look like it's been squished a little bit. The chlorophyll is a bit more darker on it. And after it's unthawed, you can see a bit more difference. You will typically see frost damage on plants like your hot crops, tomatoes, peppers. So if you do have like a draft or something inside of your house where when cold air blows on that, make sure that that's far away from your plants. Heat damage, your plant will look dried out. And this damage isn't like final. So if your plants have dried out some, or if you forgot to keep the heat on last night, your plants should be salvageable. You just have to baby them back to life. So, gently watering your plants after, they've gone without some water. I'd say, you can save a plant if it's gone a day or so without being watered or being dry. If it's gone too long without being watered, then it's just harder to save that plant. So that's why you want to check your plants on a daily basis, twice a day at least. A sign of overwatering. So on the spectrum of people and how they water, you got your underwaterers and then you got your overwaterers. With underwatering, you're not watering your plants as much, thus they're drying out more. And with overwatering, you got an abundance of water where your plants are almost being, suffocated. Another sign of overwatering is when a layer of algae builds on top of your soil and it starts to look green, dark. And when it dries out, it has a hard layer on top of it. And sometimes you can even see flies, little tiny flies flying on top of that and eating off of that soil. So to address that issue of algae buildup, you want to come through and break up that algae, and you want to make sure that it dries out. So you're going to have to properly address this. I recommend that you water your plants from the bottom up. So like put them in like a container, fill that up with some water, then dip your plants in, let the water come up through the bottom of the plant. Don't pour it on top of it because you're just feeding the algae, and you just want to, take your time and nurse that back up. And it's also important to water your plants evenly. If you're managing a ton of plants, you don't want to put too much water over there, too little water over there, because you're going to have to end up, doing multiple different practices for a ton of plants, which can make things a bit more challenging. And this is what it looks like when plants dampen off. You can kind of see like the stem of the plant getting a bit more narrow. Plug in my phone. And we haven't talked about pests yet. So one of our common pests that we see with transplants are aphids. Aphids are really tiny little creatures that are sometimes green, yellow, and red, but they're really devastating to a plant when they're on transplants, when they're really tiny, because when they soak up their sap, they're taking a lot of nutrients and energy from that plant. And so you'll typically find them at the you'll find the aphids typically at the center of that stem or under the leaf of a plant. Okay. Now, when you have an infestation, you'll definitely start to see your aphids around the stem of your plant. A simple solution to aphids is, just put a glove on and just squish them. You want to come through and check your plants daily. Other things that you can do, you can, use your spray bottle to spray them off, or, a bit more powerful water to squirt them or blast them away. But to stay on top of aphids, daily checks are super important. The fungus gnats, that's just from overwatering. You just want to water less. Yes, neem oil. Oh, thank you. Neem oil is another thing that you can spray on top of your plants to address insects. It's effective against aphids and spider mites. Spider mites, you don't typically see those on transplants, but houseplants get spider mites a lot. Neem oil is safe to use on your plants. With neem oil, you just want to make sure that you don't use a lot. You can, if you just use too much neem oil, like where you don't dilute it, it can suffocate your plants. And if you do put too much neem oil on your plants, just make sure, take a rag and just wipe off your plants with water. All right. And the ideal size to get your plants inside once they're ready to go out to the field when they have 1 to 3 true leaves are basically their adult leaves. The cotyledon leaves are their baby leaves, what they start off with. And of course, you want to also check what are those outside conditions. So if it's too wet outside, a grower last year had a scenario where she planted out her tomato plants and such, but a huge rain came through, pretty much soaked her field, and she made the decision to pull out her transplants, her newly planted transplants from the field, because she knew that they were going to suffocate because of all that water. So, be mindful of the weather after you planted your plants or before you plant your plants. And before you get your plants in the field, you want to make sure that they're hardened off, that they're used to that weather. Typically inside of a greenhouse or a house, they're a bit babied. If you put them out inside of the new world, they will experience a bit of shock. So you want to slowly introduce them, bring them out during the day, bring them back in at night for a week. And also fertilizing them before you plant them will also help with the shock that they might experience. Lindsay, to answer your question, it really depends on the type of crop. For hot crops, I'd say it's best to wait till mid-May, just so that you know that there's not a chance of frost happening again. But it's okay for cold crops to be planted before that. Right. And I also recommend that you use some type of rebate or cloth if you're going to be planting closer to May 1st for hot crops. All right, any questions about transplants?
Kello, what I'm thinking now, since you're done with your presentation, if you could stop sharing your screen, maybe we could let people unmute and take it out of the chat if people want. Either if you'd like, we're opening it up to questions now. If you'd like to, you can either unmute yourself and ask directly, or if you want to put it in the chat again, that's also fine. Kello,
Yep.
can you give some examples of directly sown seeds?
Directly sown seeds. So
and explain what if you could please explain what directly sown would be, and then some examples.
Yep. So directly sown seeds means that you're, planting them directly inside of the soil, with no extra steps or preparation or such. Well, the preparation is that you prep your bed. Transplants are plants that are planted in the pots inside and then planted outside in the garden. Some examples of direct sown seeds are carrots, beets. Sometimes beets are transplanted, but typically carrots are directly sown. Now, and also some radishes are directly sown, turnips, beets. But you typically, usually carrots, for example, they don't like to have their roots disturbed, and some cucurbits as well. And so that's why you typically see those directly sown. Another reason is that the seed is expensive. So it's okay, from that perspective, it's okay for them to seed a bunch of seeds out there and, let germinate what germinates. Also, with larger seeds like tomatoes and peppers and such, the seeds are more expensive. So you want to make sure that your seed is guaranteed to grow. And so that's why you put it through that transplant process, because you don't want to waste your money by planting something where anything can happen once it goes outside. And also, those plants you need to extend that season so that they can fruit properly, so that you can get your harvest for them. within your time frame.
Okay. Anybody else want to unmute? You feel free if you'd like. If you we encourage people to, speak up and share your thoughts or questions, or you can put it in the chat. Oh,
I have
Linda.
a question.
Yeah, go ahead. Zarina.
Zarina. Thank you all so much for this class. So if I am starting my season indoors according to that schedule, like the week by week thing, and that's because different seeds take a different amount of time for them to get their true leaves, right? Is that correct? Yep. Okay, and then like I'm putting them all outside the same time. Like, so as soon as they have the true leaves, I can then put them outside as long as the weather is appropriate. Is that correct?
So that's correct. I would also add that you harden them off. So they got their true leaves, but you want to still introduce them slowly to the elements, okay? So hardening off, it's a week process where you just take them outside, just put them on your porch, let them just be outside, and at time just bring them in. And you just want to repeat that for a week, then you're okay to plant them outside.
Okay. And if we're doing a small backyard, you said that we can put them directly into those trays, right? And we can put like 2 to 3 seeds, depending on what the germination rate is or whatever. We can put 2 to 3 seeds directly in that. So these are like the same trays that you guys give us, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. I think I'm cool. Thank you.
Great. Next, Linda, you want to unmute?
Yeah, I just lost something in translation. So there were 2 different kinds of trays. There was a tray with like 20 different things in it, 20 different seeds in it. And then there was the 4 tray where I'm putting 2 or 3. I got lost as to what I'm doing there.
Right. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Akil.
So those are just options. So you don't have to do either or. What I would recommend for you is to, well, for your size garden, I recommend just a huge tray or some type of container. And even in that container, you can still divide it up and put like, 1 seed on this side. Now, let me draw it out. So if you have like a huge
Akela, could you if you could just define what the difference between the 2 options are? Yeah. I think. So
one option is for somebody germinating a ton of plants and they're, germinating them for other people. Now, if you're doing it for yourself, then you don't have to do that option. So that's why we use things like the strip tray, which has, tons of rows where we're putting, hundreds of transplants in each of those cells. Now, if you're at home, if you have like multiple containers, like let's say you just got a cup, you can put like 2 to 3 seeds there. That's fine. If you have like a big container, you can even divide it up yourself. You can put your tomatoes over here. You can put your peppers over here, and you can use something like a popsicle stick in the middle.
Okay.
Yeah, some spinach, you can do it like that.
Okay, so I don't have to move them, Akela. Then I don't need to move them because I'm not giving them to somebody else, and that's right. What you're doing with the portrait. Got it. Okay, thank you.
Now, yeah. So basically, you're gonna still have to. Well, if you have enough soil inside of this tray, then you don't necessarily have to pot them up. But if you do see that they're showing signs of like, competing with the other plants next to them, then it might be good to have, another cup or something ready to put that 1 tomato plant in, or, another space to put those plants if they're competing with each other.
And then I just loosen the dirt a little bit. I don't mean to overtake. I just loosen the dirt a little bit and take the plant itself out very carefully. And when I move it, I don't want any dirt or anything with it at the same level that you told me that it already is. Okay, got it. Got it. Thank you.
Okay, Kella, there's a few questions here. Could you review, so Lisa's asking about true leaves equals cotyledon leaves. I think she's trying to understand. Could you just do the review of what's a cotyledon and what's a true leaf, and then just review that's that part about like once they have true leaves, how much time before they go outdoors?
Mm-hmm. Let me see if so the cotyledon leaf is the baby leaf of a plant. It's the starter leaf.
Yeah.
Yep. So as soon as that plant, so this is the seed, as soon as it breaks out, it has its cotyledon leaf. Now, that's a sign of, a baby plant, okay? A plant that's not ready to go outside. Now, as it grows, its adult leaves start to show. This is kind of the sign of an adolescent plant, which is almost ready to go outside, but you just want to make sure, and I'm not an artist, by the way.
You're doing great. It looks great.
You want to make sure that there's just a couple more leaves on there for that plant to support itself. Now another, like once you have 2 to 3 true leaves and it's looking very sturdy, looking strong, and you'll be able to tell by just looking at that plant that it looks really healthy. Once it has its true leaves, then it's ready to go. Another sign that a plant is ready to, go or needs more space, you'll start to see the cotyledon leaves start to yellow. Now, that's a sign that it needs more nutrients and that you should, do something else with it, or pot it up or some sort. Typically, that's like another telltale sign that it's time to pot up that plant, but you're safe going with just having 2 to 3 true leaves, and also it's being the time for that plant to go outside, which is dependent on that plant. So if it's like April 20th and my kale plant has 2 to 3 true leaves, then if conditions are also good outside, then I'll plant that plant outside as well.
Okay. Next question. After you plant the seeds in the trays, should the tray be left in darkness and covered for the first couple of days to aid germination?
Yes, but over those couple of days, you still want to make sure that you're checking it consistently. So let's say, so each day you're coming and checking that tray, even if it's like, there's no quote unquote timeline for those seeds to germinate. That's why you need to check it consistently. So you come through the second day and you start to see those seed coats start to break open. That's when you want to give your plant light, okay? That's when they need some sort of sunlight. If you don't give them sunlight during that period, then that's when you'll get that picture that I showed you with those yellow brassicas, okay?
Can I just interject that? I would say, or light. It could be the grow light. It could be the grow light, right?
Light in general, light.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, anybody else? Opening up for questions. I think these people are ready to start some seeds indoors.
That's
Do you
good.
feel like you have everything you need to know to start your own seeds?
I do have a question, sorry.
Great.
I already asked this in the chat, I know, but I just wanted to kind of like expand on it. So like, I have some like really leggy kale. And so like the stems are already like this, like this long. And then like I'm seeing some of the true leaves come in, but like will they actually mature okay once I do plant them? I'm just concerned that they're like too far gone.
They're not too far gone. I've had, if you all saw that picture of those plants, some of them are like super leggy. Like I've still used some of those plants. Don't toss your plants. You want to keep your plants as long as possible because you never know if something's gonna, not make it. You always want to have a backup plan. So like keep those plants as a backup plan. When you do seed that plant, even though it's like super leggy, like you got and it looks pretty weird. The true leaf is probably up here with the Calavita leaves right next to it. The danger or what's the issue that plant will face is that stem is going to get a ton of sunlight, which can dry out that plant. So when you go to seed it, or when you go to pot it up, bury all that extra stem in soil, okay? And every leggy plant won't make it, but that's going to help it out a lot. And eventually you'll start to see that plant naturally correct itself. Like I've had plants in the past that were like super leggy, just buried in the soil. And after like after like a week or so, it looks just like the other plant. It's totally fine to have. It's not ideal, but you can still work with it.
Got it. Okay, that's helpful. Should I start to bury it like further in the soil indoors, or should I just wait until I transplant them outdoors?
No, you want to do that right now. If you wait, how many plants do you have like this?
A lot. There's like,
you want to take what you need. Take the plants that you need, and do them like so. So, yeah.
Yeah, and maybe some like bigger, like 4-inch, because you don't need assuming that you don't need a ton of them. If you already have a lot, if you put them in bigger pots that you could allow you to have that depth to bury them into, that would probably be helpful.
Got it. Okay. So is it worth getting the grow light then now at that stage still?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And also, like they're growing like this because they don't have the space to grow. So they're competing, with their brothers and sisters. So even if you do like save a couple of them, just make sure that they're still spaced out amongst that tray.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Okay, next question. My plant stems are very thin and weak looking in the tray. They seem to be intertwined. Edna, is there a question related to that? It sounds like they're leggy, like we were like similar scenario that we were just talking about.
Yeah, they are. They're very thin and weak looking.
Okay, so I think maybe you would do the same thing as the last scenario.
Yeah.
Okay.
And always have some extra seed in hand. Space out your germinations. So like this year we did it because our distribution is longer, but I germinated plants weeks in between. So I had like my first batch of brassicas, I germinated 1 week, and then my next ones I did it a week later. And so I was still able to see like, oh, I did this with my last brassicas. Let me do something different with my second round. So give yourself some time. Don't put all your basket. Don't put your eggs in one basket. Don't put your basket on your eggs.
Okay, next question. I've read that fertilizing transplants isn't recommended because they are so sensitive. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So, I'm not recommending that you fertilize your transplants in like week 1. These are fertilizings for your transplants with true leaves, your transplants that are older. So Once they start to show that development, then it's okay for you to use fertilizers on them. And with your fertilizer, it's important that you don't over fertilize, that you dilute when you can. And and yeah, so fertilize after your plants have true leaves, okay?
And that's also like if they've been hanging out in those pots for a long time, right? Like,
Yeah, so like if they're showing signs of yellowing, which is a typical sign of some type of nutrient deficiency, then add. With our transplants, they are on a schedule. So about 2 weeks before our distribution, that's when I start to fertilize plants. And I use fish emulsion. Not fish emulsion, excuse me. I use worm castings. So I just take a bit of worm castings, mix that up in some type of tea and such. And then I have like a little spray gun with the watering compartment, and then I'm able to just spray my transplants. It doesn't have to be super, in depth. In some cases, you could just take, your blood meal or whatever, sprinkle that thinly on top of your plants, and then water that in. That should do them fine. But, fertilizing and all of that is just to help your plants hold until they get inside of the ground. It's always going to be better to, get them in that soil because that's where the nutrients is. You're just fertilizing them because they're in that tray and the nutrients is limited. So understand that. And of course you can always, fertilize your plants to, boost how they look, but, ultimately it's just a Band-Aid or, just to help your plants get to that next step.
how often are you adding something like blood meal?
Well, I would add blood meal maybe once or twice before I take that plant outside. So that would probably be like twice in a month. It's not something that you have to do each week because it takes a while for that blood meal to really respond and really affect that plant. So like the only thing that I treat with blood meal is our leeks. And so I did an application of that earlier this week. And I only did that because it showed signs of yellowing. And actually, excuse me, I didn't use blood meal this year. I used worm castings. In years past, I used blood meal, but I only did that because it showed signs of yellowing. So it's not something that you have to put on a schedule. It could just be something that you do in reaction or preemptively. And I only do that once or twice before it goes out in the ground.
Okay. Any final questions? We are getting pretty close to a wrap-up time of 3 o'clock. Anybody else?
Let's see.
Okay. I think with that, we'll wrap it up. Thank you so much, Akello.
All right,
been
thank
great.
you. And yeah, you all will have my email, so feel free to shoot me any questions if you have them. And
can you just write it on the board, or I'll write it in the chat, Akello.
Mhm.
Okay. Very good.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Have a great Saturday. Enjoy your weekend. Take care.
All right, peace.
Thank you.
We'll share the side.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good presentation.
Thank you. Great.
Appreciate it.
Good news. Good news.